Well, good morning, everybody. It's kind of been an interesting morning for me here. I'm actually on a family vacation, and I'm getting lots of text messages and phone calls from friends early this morning saying, don't come home. And it's kind of funny because for the last 45 to 50 days, there's been a stretch of area, parts of Nebraska getting into parts of Iowa, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, that has just not been able to get the atmosphere to crack open and give us good storms in this area. We've been covering this drought now for weeks. And here I leave, and the ridge that's been over Texas opens up to the east. It's bringing in some serious heat into the central part of the country, but along the edge, we're having ridge-riding storms. And you can see they're hitting some of the dry spots, like parts of Nebraska. Watch this last couple of frames here in this radar animation hitting this very dry section of I-80 right in through here. And then over here in Illinois, had storms yesterday, and then you can see them again showing up early this morning. In fact, my house at home, I just was texting my mother-in-law who's staying there for us while we're gone, and told her ping pong ball size hail is on its way. So we had this discussion, right? We knew that there was the risk that when the drought did begin to break in these key areas that have been so dry for the last 45 to 50 days, that it would likely not do so in a gentle way. I'm going to come back to the other pieces of the country here, but I just want to show you the big thing that's going on here. You know, you look at this and say, well, what changed? Did the Bermuda High come back? Did El Nino kick into gear? And the answer to all of that is no. What happened here is that a ridge opened up over Texas about 15 days ago. And then it continued to evolve over the last week, and then now it's here opening up toward like Missouri and really centering itself on eastern Texas. And along the northern edge, this is where the flow has returned. So that's been a problem, right? We've not been able to get flow into this area. And what I'm very concerned about later today, and this is so subtle, take a look at this map here, is that there is a boundary that's going to be sitting right in through here. And this will be the boundary on which we're going to watch again for more storms to show up later on today. And what ends up happening is, remember the upper level flow is coming over the top, but as those storms pop on this boundary, do you see this air coming in this direction right in through here? This air has got much higher humidity, and there's more moisture in this air. It's the unstable part of the atmosphere. And it's not just a full open flow out of the Gulf either. This isn't like, the big Bermuda High up here just cranking moisture in, but there is enough that when we're going to watch these storms come out of this particular area, they'll likely just build right down into this particular spot and potentially produce a lot of severe weather. So this morning on our all hazards weather map, a lot of this in the nearby area is just still filled with smoke, and many people down here in parts of Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, we've not seen near ground smoke like this, many of us in our lifetimes. But as the farther you go north into Wisconsin and Michigan, they've seen this quite a bit. And of course, New England has as well. But then you have around this to the south, this is all heat advisory. This is excessive heat warnings. We have excessive heat watches, not only here, but out into the west. Notice the heat coming into California we've been talking about. And there is this morning a severe thunderstorm watch early this morning right into this area. Now that smoke, just take a quick look at where we're expecting that smoke to go. So this is vertically integrated smoke, so there's still very high smoke content in here, but we're mixing both Mexican and Canadian wildfires to bring that smoke in. And can you see how the smoke's running over the top of that ridge right in through here? That's a really key part of what's going on in the atmosphere. This is tracing out that flow very well. So on satellite this morning, here's some of the large storms that just continue to pop. This is early in the day. We're going to watch the ones following it in through here. We're going to watch their outflow potentially become the new storms that develop in this area and then race over into this particular part of the country. So just this morning as the sun was rising, those are the two main complexes of storms I'm going to be keeping an eye on today. Now, they have had a history of putting down some pretty nasty weather. Take a look at the hail reports we had yesterday coming out of Colorado, Wyoming, and Nebraska, almost right here on the Nebraska-Kansas line. A lot of 3 and 4 inch diameter hail in some of this, and you can see some of the severe weather reports in that area. Not only the large hail, but the straight line wind damage. And then it's not to say there wasn't storms elsewhere, but this was a nasty complex of storms that ran through this area. We step back and just say, look at these last 3 days of total accumulated precipitation. And this is just the beginning of where these ridge riders are going to go. So it's been nice that the meteorology has fit into this well. Remember, we watched that corridor. We're going to watch the ridge open up, so it's going to start to bring in this corridor. And there is actually a low that's going to sneak into the northern plains, and that's going to actually bring the flow around in a direction like this. So all three of these components are leading to these next three maps. Today's severe weather outlook from parts of Iowa, Missouri through Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, they've now upgraded this to an enhanced risk. And just as we discussed, there's always been this worry that when the drought broke, it would not do so gently. And I was just talking with my colleagues early this morning, Matt Reardon and Andrew Pritchard. We just always, every early morning, have a discussion on the weather. And the concern is that there might be the risk of very strong straight line winds plus hail, and there is the risk of some of these storms producing tornadoes in this particular area. So if you're in this section of the country, I mean, we can just look everywhere within this slight risk. I want you to be very weather aware today, have multiple ways to get weather information, because for a lot of you in this area, it's been weeks since we've seen a thunderstorm. And so it's just a reminder of what you need to be doing. So have access to radar, have access to a way to get weather information from weather.gov as an example, just to keep an eye on this. Weather radio is also excellent. So then you notice tomorrow on the 30th, it's the same track, right? That's got the risk of storms. And you go out here to the 1st of July. It's now opening up farther to the east into the eastern Corn Belt, the Ohio Valley, parts of the Tennessee Valley, and the Appalachian Mountains. So I'd like to show you two high-res models this morning. The first one is going to be the HRR. This is called the High Resolution Rapid Refresh Model. This is the 6Z run. And let's get this queued up. So here's the morning storms we just talked about. Here's its how it resolved the big storms coming through east central Illinois this morning as well. So decent initialization, but as we play this forward later in the day, what I'm concerned about is this afternoon and this evening, how these storms that are initiating here this morning end up developing across Iowa, northern Missouri, and into Illinois. There is the risk that these storms become a pretty large damaging squall line that comes through parts of Illinois into Indiana, as you see here, and then dives into Kentucky. I'm going to watch this very carefully throughout the day today. What's interesting is that HRR has this all happening pretty early in the day, and then it shows up behind it more complex. Look at this, complexes of storms coming out of these same regions that were just hit. Isolated, possible severe convection farther to the north of this as well, and all that smoke. And as we get into the overnight hours tonight into early Friday morning, you notice again that's where the storms continue to roll over the top of that ridge right in through this area. So there's actually a few rounds of risk in this area just as we work ourselves through the next 36 hours. Now the high resolution NAM goes out farther, goes out 60 hours. So you can see this is this morning it blowing up this complex of storms in a much different way than the HRR did, didn't it? And then as you watch later in the day, here's the same storms coming through midday into Iowa and Illinois, and then they kind of pull through Illinois by 6 o'clock tonight. So that's, again, earlier than I anticipated, but we're going to watch the storms over the edge. So watch it again. Here's throughout the entire day today. Now, could the model have some interesting feedback that's producing this system that's diving into southern Illinois, into Kentucky, and eventually into Tennessee? Yes. Sometimes the models do that. They get overactive with the convection and don't parameterize it very well. It's hard for them to do this, but we'll watch this anyway. I think the main threat, though, is later in the day when that system rolls over the top. So again, you'll see tonight, just like we saw, more storms firing up here in the western plains. See more rain coming through parts of the upper Midwest and Great Lakes Basin. And then tomorrow, there's Friday's storms. So you can see them rolling through here again. This is Friday afternoon and evening. So that same setup as you just saw in the high resolution, the HRR, is now showing up in the NAM too. So we put all this together and look at this next week, and you've got it right in through this corridor. This is the 0Z run from the WPC. And again, we have a high probability of bringing in rains into parts of Iowa, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, Tennessee. These are some very dry regions. The models have really shrunk this area to the north here where we had better rains. That's now been pulled south, and this looks to be a drier stretch in through this area, although there will be isolated storms coming through that region. But I'm focusing a lot on this drought area getting busted here by this severe weather complex that's going to be evolving over the next few days. To go to the next model, this is the ECMWF, which I think has the best kind of look at this. And you see that through the day today, notice the ECMWF is also pushing those storms into southern Illinois, southwestern Indiana, and into Kentucky, kind of like what the NAM did. But then you see, again, the complex of storms rolling through this same area, going through the day on Friday, all the way out here. Let's just play this out a week. And that seems to be the most open corridor to the strong to severe storms. Now, you do notice the the ECMWF, got too many models I'm thinking about this morning, is trying to bring in better storms here late in the time period for that area that I was worried about being a bit drier in the WPC outlook. But notice from southern parts of Minnesota into northeastern Iowa, this pocket of Wisconsin, that area just continues to be missed. And I know I'm focusing a lot on the Midwest, but this is where this drought has been just gripping this part of the country. So if we look at the next 7 days in terms of a anomaly map, this is what we've got from the European model. All right. So take a close look at this overall and just see different regions and how the models are putting down the precipitation. I'm concerned about the dryness in the Canadian prairie. I'm concerned about the dryness that's along the Gulf Coast, although oftentimes the models miss this because there's a lot more scattered convection here than the models are able to see. We're going to watch carefully, even though there was a lot of heavy rain here in the last 2 weeks, we're going to watch carefully what's going on up the East Coast as well, specifically the Mid-Atlantic down to the Carolinas. And you can notice here, look at the rain that's coming into Montana. I want to show you this. So we're going to go to the European model actual solution here. So this is the every 6 hours of total precip. We're going to start this off early today on Thursday, play through. Here we go. This is now overnight Thursday, getting into Friday. There's the second round of the complex of storms coming through. And then what I want you to see here is that this is kind of a battle between two high pressure cells. There's higher pressure to the south, there's higher pressure here to the north, and in between is where the heavier rains are going to be. But you're going to notice as we get into Sunday and into Monday, a big low curls itself up into parts of, Saskatchewan over to Manitoba. And while that happens, there's going to be a frontal boundary that drags to the south of it right here. So by early next week, on Tuesday getting into Wednesday, we're going to watch for that frontal boundary to push up against the Rocky Mountains, stretch into the northern plain. So this is the storm system coming later in the time period, and then that pushes through the upper Midwest. So that's that second round of precipitation that we're going to be looking for there. Overall, these probability maps really hold the key in understanding the pattern. And your new 10-day forecast, and by the way, the European model just released a new high-resolution version of the ensemble. It's now down to 0.1 degree, which matches its operational runs. Take a look. This whole region in through here is now better than 90% chance of getting an inch. And if I step this up to 2 inches, that's it. All of that because of where that ridge has opened itself up and now has these ridge riding complexes of storms. So we think about this and say, well, does this continue? Is this out there farther in the pattern? And I'll take you out here and show you what's going on. So this is through the weekend. This is early next week. So there's that low coming through the Canadian prairie. Here's the trough of low pressure that's left over after running over that ridge. And then you see this trough here diving down early next week. That's the one that's producing the storms in this area next week, early next week. And then it gets set up just like that. Now, all the way out here to day 10, what has changed? Did the Bermuda High come back? It did not. Did we shift around some of the ridges across the central U.S.? We did. Is there a Canadian ridge? No longer. So what ends up happening is this pattern has gone over to something a bit more like this. And there's just been an increase, better flow coming through some of the driest parts. And this is just what is happening in summer. To be honest, I hate to say this, but I'm very thankful that heat finally built into this area in Texas. It's been terrible for Texas in terms of the extent of this heat wave, but it has finally set up some north-south contrast, and that is what's delivered rain to some of those other folks that have been so very dry in the Midwest. But this heat in Texas is nothing to really just blow off, because it has been extremely hot there, and it's been detrimental to not only just people, but of course the crops that are in that area as well. So before I talk about that, I want to give you the new week 2 outlooks. CPC, European model, GFS, very similar overall look, except notice the European model throughout parts of the Canadian prairie still has the drier bias. Not the same kind of outlook here from the GFS, and I know the CPC's graphics stop at the 49th parallel, but they extend this wetter weather farther to the north as well. I want to watch this carefully because it's a key time for canola, just as an example here, being a couple weeks ahead of schedule due to some early season heat. So let's watch that. All right, back to those temperatures. Since June 15th up until almost here now, the end of the month, parts of Texas are having the hottest second half of June on record. Look at this. So I told you this has been extreme down here. But to the north of it, do you see the contrast showing up? Colder in the northwest. In fact, Idaho, near record cold second half of June. It's been cold over the Appalachian Mountains. That's the contrast that has now developed that's helping to drive these storm systems. But I want to show you this again. Expansive area of heat advisories, excessive heat warnings, excessive heat watches. They've now shown back up here farther to the to the west into California, and this is what today's temperatures are going to look like. So maybe 101, Kansas City through Columbia, St. Louis 99, Very hot conditions all everywhere here into the south. Some temperatures here up to 20 degrees above average. Then as we go into Friday, look at the heat coming into the west. Look at the heat that's maintained here under that ridge. All of this cloud cover, cooler weather. We then go into Saturday's high temperatures. This is Sunday. Look at the heat in the western United States. And then as we get into Monday, watch this. See the cooler air coming in? That's with the storms that come into this area by Tuesday. But a lot of the Corn Belt, very hot, very steamy, a lot of storms firing on this pattern. So that takes you all the way up to next Wednesday. Last couple of things here. Let's take a look at that 5-day sliding window of average temperature anomalies. And let's go ahead and park it out there day 5 through 10. So this is what you just saw kind of at the very end of the previous animation. Now what is very interesting about this pattern to me is that as I go out here into day 10 through 15, we notice that this area stays cooler, probably wetter as well. The ridge seems to be still present in some way, but very hot into the southwest, but not into California. And so this pattern needs to be monitored carefully as we get out there toward the second week of July. We're going to wait to see how this sets itself up in July, because this rain that's coming through this corridor is really buying some folks some critical time toward pollination with the crop. Now, last thing I want to show you again is I've been saying what's done this. It's been this ridge that's opened up that set up the contrast in temperatures. It's not the Bermuda High. The Bermuda High is still absent. I'm just playing you out here through the next couple of weeks. This is it. It's over here. The high pressure is anomalous almost toward Greenland. And over here, almost all the way back to Europe. There's no big Bermuda High here opening this all up. It's all complements of that ridge in Texas. And then you say, well, what about El Nino? Well, El Nino's cooking, but so is the negative Pacific meridional mode. I mean, look at this. This is very cold. So this is what we have to continue to monitor going long range, and I'll talk to you about that tonight in my in-depth report. One last thing I want to tell you, we usually get the European weeklies on Monday night and on Thursday night. We now get them every night. So this has been a new upgrade by the European model. This is its newest outlook for the precipitation pattern in the month of July. We'll just get to watch the evolution. This is what I'm so excited about. The day-to-day evolution of this model. This is going to dramatically start to improve our skill looking at the forecast out there 2, 3, 4 weeks in advance. So for a guy like me, it's kind of like Christmas, here in late June, getting a present like this from the Europeans. So I'll be watching it carefully. I'm going to stay away as long as I possibly can so we can get as much rain to come back to the central United States as we can. But with that, I'll wrap it up. I really appreciate your time and attention. Thank you to Matt Reardon for covering for me yesterday. I'll talk to you again tonight. Thanks.